Let's talk more about the history of British colonialism and what the death of Queen Elizabeth could now mean for the future of the British Commonwealth. Professor of History and African American Studies at Harvard University, Caroline Elkins, joining me now. Caroline, sure appreciate you joining us for this conversation. Let's talk about after the economic freedom fighters released a statement, and I have the quote here. "We do not mourn the death of Elizabeth because to us her death is a reminder of a very tragic period in this country and Africa's history." They went on, Caroline, to say that she never acknowledged the atrocities that her family inflicted on Native people when Britain invaded across the world. So British colonialism, it was a time in history rooted in enslavement and violence, and we saw it most notably in Kenya. What is the challenge now for King Charles as he is stepping into his role?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Look, I think he's facing an enormous challenge. For a very long period of time, there was question marks over, was the empire violent? Wasn't it violent? How much did the Queen know? How much didn't she know? But there's no question right now that the simple fact is serious crimes, particularly during Queen Elizabeth's reign, were perpetrated across the empire. I've spent the last 3 decades studying them and coming to terms with some of them. And the protests, which we just saw on camera, the demands for reparation, but at a minimum, a demand for acknowledgement. And I think King Charles III is going to have to reevaluate his mother's legacy, the legacy of his forebears, and if he hopes to bring the monarchy into the 21st century, he's going to have to deal with this head on.
Do you think we are going to see an acknowledgement or at least pressure to do so? What are you forecasting here?
Again, fantastic question. I think he is absolutely going to see continued pressure. There has been already, and I acknowledge, and we must acknowledge it, is we're just seeing on camera the incredible legacy of this queen across many different fronts. But this issue, which is not a minor one, around empire, must be addressed. And the new king has to break with tradition. He has to break with the past. And I think he's going to have a very difficult time doing that. He is already in his first public address. He was speaking in the same kind of language that his mother did when she broadcast, as you played, on her 21st birthday, her devotion to the nation and the empire. And look, King Charles is still using the same paternalistic language, speaking about the empire and Commonwealth as a family. That's just not going to fly anymore for many people in the formerly colonized world, and also for those that are members of the still Commonwealth realm nations.
Yeah, words mean everything. And then, as you know, last year Barbados became a republic and swore in its first president 55 years after the Caribbean island gained independence from Britain, formally severing ties and ending nearly 400 years of British rule. What do you think? Could we see more Caribbean and African countries follow suit now that Charles has been crowned king?
Yeah, I think I think we're going to see absolutely, pushes in this direction. You have to remember, from a very sort of technical constitutional standpoint, for many of these countries, the bar is very high to make that happen. So I think whether or not it actually goes through remains to be seen. But I think the important thing for King Charles III, and also when debates are going to unfold more and more after a proper period of mourning for the Queen about the legacy with empire, and we have to bear in mind, even for places like Barbados, but certainly for many others, that it was in Her Majesty's name that major crimes were committed in empire. And we're not talking about one-offs. We're talking about, wholesale detentions without trial of entire populations, having interrogators nicknamed by local journalists HMTs, or Her Majesty's torturers. So we're not talking about things that happened hundreds of years ago. We're talking about things that happened when the Queen was on the throne, and quite frankly, when King Charles III himself was very much alive, although, of course, a small boy at the time.
If you had the chance, with all your background and what you are teaching there at Harvard University, if you could sit down with King Charles III, with his advisors, what would you say to him? What would you advise him to do?
I would advise him both as another human being and also as a professor who's studied this for 30 years, and that is, it's time to make amends. The evidence is too overwhelming, and the pain that has been endured for generations across the world. This was the largest empire in human history. And he has a real opportunity right now to lead from the front in a way that will bring the world forward. And I think much like his mother, the crown has enormous significance, not just in Britain, but across the world, here in the United States. And it's time for a new beginning. And I think that he can both honor his mother as well as look to forward and think about a world where the monarchy plays a massive role in how we think about the past and how it informs the present and our collective future.
Caroline Elkins will continue the conversation. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.